I'm Novel Mike, and this is my opinion. So I've made it pretty clear at this point that Final Fantasy 15 is not my favorite game in the world, but there is something to be said about uh, making sure that the game is complete before you ship it off. And Square Enix has kind of shot themselves in the foot, I think, in something that I think they're trying to do for a good reason, but I don't think they entirely realize the repercussions of it. So earlier this week, they came out with a statement, talking about how many copies they've shipped, 5 million worldwide, which is great for them. And they were saying, as kind of a reward for the game doing so well, they want to continue updating the game, which is something they did for the demo originally. When the demo came out with Final Fantasy Versus 13, they did continuously update the demo based off fan feedback several times, which was an interesting idea. I rather they've just spent that time making the actual game better, considering how it shipped. But there's precedent for them wanting to update the game. Specifically, what they mentioned they want to do is that they want to fix Chapter 13, which I have not gotten to yet, but I heard is just a terrible experience all around because they basically take away all of all the weapons and powers you've had up until then, and they give you this ring or something, and it has different abilities on it. But essentially, this chapter, the way it plays out is it's almost like a survival horror game, and it's all about running and like sneaking around, and it just doesn't work, and it's just horrible, and it's not fun, and it gets to the point where it's completely unplayable at times for how like certain the enemies react and stuff like that. And it just makes generally a not fun experience for everyone. And from that, that's what they're going to do in the short term. In the midterm in time, they want to essentially. I'm going to read this out loud just to give context. After that, we're hoping to delve deeper into the story, adding scenes that will give new insight to character motivations, such as why Ravis walked the path he did. We will need a little time with these, as they'll need to be localized and voiced in other languages, but we'll let you know the details once everything is set. So that could be good in certain aspects, but I don't think it's going to fix the overall problem that the characters and the story are just not well written and not well developed. And one of the biggest complaints I had is, they don't give very good context to the story. Especially in the end of the first chapter where they're showing off essentially how Noctis's kingdom falls and how his father dies and all that. And I don't think that this is necessarily going to fix that problem. I think this is more of a band-aid fix that they realize that, yeah, our story does kind of suck and people really are kind of hating on it after certain points in the game. And yeah, we probably should fix that. The problem is with that is that this sets a dangerous precedent because essentially, for me as a consumer, reading just the first two parts of this, and there's more, makes me not even want to continue playing the game right now. Why do I want to continue playing the game, get to Chapter 13, which I've heard is horrible and I'm going to absolutely hate, even though I'm not loving the game already, when I could just be playing the game like a year from now or 6 months from now when they've actually finished it and the game is how they actually originally intended it to be. But not that it's probably as they originally intended it to be, because I think that game was Final Fantasy Versus 13, which went to the wayside. But I also think that this sets a dangerous precedent for game development in general, because if this works for Square Enix, you can bet your damn ass that either they or other companies are going to start trying to get away with stuff like this, where they basically ship a game, even if the story's garbage, they say, oh, hey, we'll patch it and we'll fix it after the fact, which I think you'll see a lot of companies end up promising stuff like that if this does become a thing and not delivering on it at all. I want to give Square Enix the benefit of the doubt with this, but they've continuously just not shown that we should have any faith with them with the development of this game. Originally promising, this big worldwide release in September and then delaying the game till November, and then saying the reason that they were going to delay the game is to not have a day one patch, which I supported, by the way. I don't remember if I actually made a video on the subject, but I thought that was a good idea. I was okay with the delay because of that. And then I got the game and there was a day one patch, which just infuriated me before I even started playing the game. And if every game is, if you look at, people will probably argue, oh, hey, yeah, just because Square Enix did this one time doesn't mean they're going to do it in the future. Doesn't mean that all these other companies are going to do it. But that's what everyone said about microtransactions, and that's what everyone said about online passes and season passes and everything else. And you look at all these terrible trends in gaming, it all started from one incident, and one terrible thing happened. And this is Square Enix trying to, I think, do right by their fans, the people who bought the game, but they're not really doing it, I think, in the best way. To tell us that, yeah, the game is going to be so much better a year from now just makes me think, why the frick did I pay $60 for this game now? I mean, it doesn't. And for people who haven't bought the game, it's like, yeah, I'll just wait. I mean, it's not a good business decision to do this. And the final part that they were talking about is that they're going to include or look at making certain key characters playable, which I think could be cool, but I don't think they're going to do it the way that I want them to. So what I would want is, if they're going to add characters such as Core, for example, who is the first guest character you get, as a playable character later on in the game, I think that they would need to rewrite elements of the story to include those characters in it when they aren't normally there. And the problem with that is that's a lot of time and effort, and I seriously doubt that Square Enix is going to go the extra mile on that. I think what more likely we're going to see is you'll be able to switch these characters out in your party, and they'll probably have some one-liners and stuff like that to include. But the story and the cutscenes and everything will play out as if they're not actually there. And, if they add certain characters that are playable, and such as Iris, for example, later on in the game, and they don't change that, if the game references those characters anyway and they're with your party, that just kind of takes you out of the experience, I think, because it's not matching up with what you're playing. But we'll see. I would like to believe that they're really going to put the extra effort into this, since they are talking about it being a long-term feature, but we'll have to see exactly how it works. But that will be a long time from now, is part of the problem. And then they also talked about adding customizable avatars, which I don't think anyone really wants. Like, if you want a customizable avatar in a game like this, just go play Final Fantasy XIV. Like, that's the whole concept of that game, is, you create your own Final Fantasy character in this world. And there's other stuff too, like they're adding like a New Game Plus mode, letting you introduce like low level runs and God mode and stuff like that, and adding like limited time bosses and limited time hunts and stuff like that, which, okay, great, but it doesn't fix some of the core problems that the story and the characters have, which is really what I seem to have a problem with them saying they're going to fix, because I don't think it's going to actually fix anything. I think you're playing, I don't remember if I said this or not, but I think you're playing like a small band-aid onto, an open wound, and I don't know that it's going to make anything better. But we'll see. We just don't know what exactly is going to happen, and we'll have to just wait and see and go from there, and hope that this doesn't become a trend, because the last thing I want to see is every game coming out in the future and just shipping in an unfinished state and not even trying to finish them. And games are already kind of doing that anyway, but at the very least, it does always generally feel like most of the time they don't need to update the story. Even the story is terrible, it's what they intended. And that's not what Square Enix has done here. They're definitely changing the story, and I'm not sure that is what... I mean, I want Final Fantasy 15 to be good, and if this ultimately makes the game good, I want to believe that that's the right choice. I'm just not sure that I trust Square Enix to actually do what I think needs to be done, and I think this is possibly just a shallow reaction to some of the negativity that the game has had, and that it may not be doing critically and with fans as well as they wanted it to, even with how many copies they've shipped. But we'll have to wait and see. Like I said, this is going to be a long time out. We won't know the repercussions of this for a while, and it could be a good or it could be a bad thing. You can argue both. I think I kind of sort of did that here. I just worry about the repercussions of everything. But anyway, I'm Novel Mike. That was my opinion. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and have a great day.